And we are live. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. I am just hopping on here to make sure it's live and I can see it. Yep, we can see it. So I'm gonna tag you.
All right.
And we are going to go ahead and get started. So I'm super excited about tonight's conversation. If you don't know, Beyond the White Couch is very personal to me. I started this back in January and navigating this conversation of hard topics that are needed to be had in the Black community. And I'm super excited about today, about connecting this month, about connecting with other Black mental health professionals to uncover and talk about some of the topics in mental health that we don't talk about. So we're going to start with the basics today and just talk about Black mental health in general, why we don't go to therapy or why we don't get help, talk about mental health, the hard conversations that a lot of people don't have, and just get insight from Dee and her perspective. I found her on TikTok with a lot of relatable content, and just her vibes are awesome. Just found out that she's also a Coastal alum, so we
Yes.
definitely were able to connect and speak the same language when it comes to mental health. So I'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and let the people know who you are, what you do, and all that good stuff.
Awesome. Well, first, I want to thank you, Sierra, for inviting me on to Beyond the White Couch. I'm super, super excited about this opportunity to connect and also to, continue to spread awareness of Black people and the barriers to receiving mental health treatment. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come on. Super grateful for TikTok for even having that opportunity for us to meet. And as you said, we both graduated from CCU, so
Yes.
we got that bond. Um, but hello, everyone. My name is Deeariah King. My clients call me Dee. My family calls me Dee. Everybody calls me Dee. So feel free to call me Dee. I am a licensed clinical social worker in the state of North Carolina. My background, particularly, I worked with adolescents in inpatient and outpatient settings. But within the past year, I have changed my target population to adults. So I'm currently working at a major university in the North Carolina area. I have a husband and a beautiful 11-month-old baby girl who will be turning 1 next month, and I'm having all type of feelings about that because this first year has gone so fast.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm passionate about mental health, and specifically, I'm passionate about Black people, making sure that we are focusing on our mental health. As well as taking care of ourselves. Sometimes we also forget to take care of ourselves physically, and that shows up mentally as well. Those two things correlate. So definitely an advocate for the Black community.
Absolutely. So I definitely think that people don't, and I have a baby right here who has something stuck in her hair, the joys of motherhood.
Of course,
You
of
go.
course.
That's real life.
Mhm.
Love you too. That's real life. Here you go. But let's jump into it because just something like you said, caring about the physical and mental health, and a lot of times people don't understand how that correlates and works together. But mental health holds a big stigma in the Black community. Where do you think the root of that is?
There are several things that I think are the root of this stigma within the Black community. The first, honestly, is the Black family, right? The Black family stigmatizes mental health. The way that the Black family typically speaks about mental health, it's in a way that we're saying something is wrong, right? If you need help, if you need support, then you're weak. You're not strong enough. You should be able to do this by yourself. Or you'll hear some of your elders saying, "Well, I didn't have all that, and I turned out fine." And then you looking at them like, did you? Like, did you really turn out fine? I mean, you managing, but are you really okay? So I think the language around mental health within the Black community, within the Black family specifically, is that's one of our largest barriers. Secondly, is the lack of education. We're not aware of what some symptoms of mental health look like. And then because we are not educated, sometimes just because of family history and just different levels of education and background, we sometimes downplay those symptoms, and we don't even know what to ask our providers or our doctors, and we don't really know how to advocate for ourselves either. Um, Another big issue in terms of barriers are financial barriers.
Mhm.
Of course, it takes money to attend therapy. And it wasn't until recently in 2008 that insurance companies actually started covering more of the percentage. Before 2008, I believe there was a difference of like for medical on insurance, it was a 20% coverage. For mental health and behavioral health, it was 50%. So if you are getting hospitalized, if you are having to attend therapy, that is a lot of money that's coming out of your pocket. Until 2008, things did make a shift, but there's still that thought that therapy is expensive, and for some people, it still is. So that accessibility is also a barrier.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I think the one of the largest entities that we're kind of working against in the Black community in terms of stigma is the Black church and
Mhm.
religion, and how we view religion, God, and spirituality, specifically Christianity, and mental health. There's a thought that prayer will take it away, and if you are not praying hard enough, then well, if you're not being healed, then you're not praying hard enough, and
Right.
so we have somehow had made that a correlation as well. So there's several things that I do feel is a stigma and kind of holding the Black community back from receiving mental health treatment.
Yeah, so I'd like to back up to one of the first things that you said about talking about the Black family. And if y'all not taking notes, make sure you take notes because I'm taking notes too. But when you talk about the Black family and in our older generation, or even people that are part of our generation, and they use the phrase, "Oh yeah, I turned out fine," and like you said, but did you though?
Did you? I don't
Did
know.
you? It's a lot of the conversation, but even behind people saying that I turned out fine, or back then they did what they had to do, understanding that we have the privilege and the opportunity to have resources that back then they didn't have. So
Yeah.
when somebody says like I turned out okay, I cringe because it's just like no, how not being able to, like you said, being educated on what mental health looks like and how that
Mhm.
shows up and how it can be present in how you speak to somebody or how you deal with conflict or stomach hurting. I When my daughter was young, she used to have my stomach hurts and go to the nurse a lot, not realizing that's a sign of anxiety. You
Absolutely.
know, people not being aware of those signs and symptoms that show up, or that really can cause harm to how you function with your
Mhm.
relationships or socially, in your jobs or education wise. And it's critical, like that education piece, I think, is one of the most critical points out of what you said. And also with accessibility, to be honest, you make time and money for
Mhm.
what you want to make time and money for.
Mhm.
When you understand the value of your mental health, you really start to shift your perspective. Okay, maybe I'm not going to be able to go to Starbucks every day because I got
Mhm.
to see my therapist at least once a month. You know what I'm saying? Like
Absolutely.
it starts to shift your perspective. So kudos to you. So the Black family,
Mhm.
the lack of education, accessibility, and the Black church. If
Yeah.
you did not, if you somebody somewhere falls within one of those categories, and it's you really have to evaluate what that looks like and how that shows up to you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
Kind of stepping into question number two, in acknowledging those things and understanding that, what steps do you feel that we as a community or as individuals we can take to invest more in our mental health?
Absolutely. It's funny that you asked that, because when we were just talking about accessibility, and you were like, "Hey, I might not be able to go to Starbucks." For some people with accessibility, it's just also having that knowledge that, okay, this my mental health is just as important as the other things that I want to do, not minimizing our feelings. That's super important. And so yeah, we there people have access to these things, but they have to find the value in it. And I think that's something I really like that you said, that finding the value in mental health, because that's one thing that we have been able to kind of push to the back. If it's not physical, if it ain't hurting physically, we're like, it's all right. So in terms of like making sure mentally that we're okay, that's not been something that's been on the forefront. So a few things that I would say, in order to um, I'm sorry, we're on question 2. Oh, the steps that we can do um, as a community. The first thing, I think we should change the narrative. I know it's easy for us to say that Black folks don't go to therapy, and historically that is true. I think we should start shifting that a little bit and saying historically, Black people didn't go to therapy, but now millennials, Gen Z, like that's not an issue. Um, I've started a TikTok account. People follow me on TikTok for like humorous therapy content. And this is a thing that it's become normalized. Like, I will talk to my students or my clients at the university, and they're like, "Oh, I was talking to my friend and told them that my therapist said." So we're currently are these newer generations are certainly shifting the language around therapy and what that looks like. So I think that's the first thing we need to do. Stop saying what we don't do and start acknowledging some of the positives. Like, research is showing that there's an upwards trend of Black folks attending therapy at a higher rate. So historically, we struggled a little bit, and we're still trying to get, more people, more therapists of color in the field so that we can see more people who look like us. But we are making that change. So I think that's the biggest thing for me, is changing the narrative first. And there's a couple other points that I have, but I didn't know if you had anything to add.
Yeah, I want to add to that too, is that I think that a lot of times when you talk about changing the narrative of mental health, like you said, these new kids, they got it.
They do.
I'm gonna tell you how I feel. I'm gonna let you know if I'm not okay. They use social media as an outlet, which can be questionable of whether that's effective or not. Yeah. However, they're being more aware and in tune with what they're feeling and how they're feeling and how that shows up for them. And I think that's important, and a lesson that even millennials and those before us can take note of. And we'll get to this, but I want, like, your TikTok content, I think, is a critical piece in the idea of changing the narrative about how we talk about mental health. Is it really like, oh, I'm this poised and whatever? No,
not at all.
It doesn't have to be that. So I really like that idea of changing the narrative, and I know you had some more to add.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even in terms of changing the narrative for clinicians, your therapeutic style. Not everyone can't use humor, because if you are not funny, like if you're not naturally a funny person and you try to use humor in therapy, it is going to fall flat. Your client gonna let you know you're gonna feel awkward. It ain't gonna work, right? But still being able to be authentic, bring your true self. That's also a part of changing the narrative for us as clinicians. And that was my second point for the Black community, allowing ourselves to be educated. We have some smart people amongst us, and we don't always utilize the resources that we have right here. Right. Like, I'm sure people know that you're a mental health provider. I have people that are watching that knows that I'm a mental health provider. And though we can't have dual relationships, sometimes I think that people forget, like you can ask us for resources. Now, we can't be your therapist if we're family and friends, but I know people who can, so I think also making sure that we can utilize the people within our own community, as long as we're keeping it professional, no dual relationships. But remembering that you have access to people. It doesn't have to, be someone that you found off of Google. I send out a lot of resources. I do have people that will hit me up and say, "Hey, D, is there anybody in the area that you know?" And I will send them a list of people, or I'll send them a website. And I try to always follow up with them to make sure that they're getting the care that they need, especially if they're reaching out to me for help. So yeah, just utilizing the resources that you do have within your community. Because, Black folks, we graduating. Like, we got degrees, we got money, we got coin, we doing the thing. So just making sure that we are utilizing the resources that we have.
Yeah, and I think that kind of leads into where we're going with our third question. I think a lot of that comes from, a lot of times in the Black community, we see a lot of jokes and mockery of pain. And with social media, and everybody wants to always full blast or whatever, the moment somebody is vulnerable, it's turned into a meme, or somebody has to add their commentary. Let's not even talk about what they're doing to Kevin Samuels right now, regardless of the man's intentions or what he did. Why
Yes.
y'all celebrating his death?
It's real ghetto out here, honey. It's like it's so ghetto. Like, ooh.
I mean, and I'm all for people having their opinions, but
Absolutely.
when you start to look at, okay, yeah, he ain't always say what he needed to say in the right way or said that, but are we really as a result saying, oh, he deserved to die? Like, you got some issues. We need to like unpack that a little bit. Mm-hmm. So kind of leading into question number 3, you know, there's a lot of celebrities and social media influencers that talk about, you know, mental health, and it becomes a trend. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that kind of hurts the culture, or does it, you know, help the culture?
Oh, I think that's a mixture of both. And it's funny that you talked about Kevin Samuels, because when I think about Black folks and mental health and then celebrities in the media, we have had, you know, celebrities have mental breaks and all kind of stuff like in front of us, and we laugh at it. The one that the two that comes to mind is Britney Spears. When sis shaved her head, obviously she was struggling, right? That became a meme. And then the meme of Tyrese crying when he was crying about not having his daughter. Yeah. Here this is a Black father saying, I want to see my baby. The courts are not allowing me to. Her mother is not allowing me to. And I am using social media as a cry for help. And what did we do? We laughed at the man. Mm-hmm. Like, we still using that as a meme. Oh my goodness. In terms of social media and celebrities being able to advocate, like, yeah, it's a detriment, and, you know, there's some positive in it. The helpful part of it, you know, they're able to normalize mental health. Celebrities have large platforms. People listen to them. They're influencers, whether they want to be or not. They're role models, whether they want to be or not. So I think it's great that they, you know, use their platform. The downside is sometimes, you know, like, they're sharing some really harmful information. Like, when you get powerful people like Elon Musk, he tweeted the other day and said that he thinks that Adderall is worse than some other drug. And there's no proof of that. Like, sir, you're not a psychiatrist. You ain't nobody doctor. You just, I mean, you rich and you have the platform. So, like, that's good. But the information that you're sharing on it is detrimental, because some people take that as gospel. Right. So I definitely think, you know, there's pros and cons to that. So we should be careful about who we're following and getting that information from.
Right. And even from the perspective of protecting your mental health, people love to throw around, oh, I'm protecting my peace. Okay. But you out here following all of these social media people who really ain't got their stuff together either. And you think that's going to help you. So we have these things like, oh, I'm going to protect my peace. Oh, I need to have a self-care day, or these mental health days. And I think that what's happening with the trend is that people are kind of creating this false narrative of what that actually means. Understanding that protecting your peace is not just blocking people. It is creating boundaries. Absolutely. Do you know what that means? Absolutely. Right? So then again, going back to one of the first things that you said is being educated on these things. And I think that a lot of times that when we deal with social media, celebrities in these conversations, they have the power of influence. But like you said, sometimes it's like, that ain't it, sis.
Right. Right. There's some really big influencers. I'm not going to say the name, because I don't want nobody to come and try to sue me. I'm not at that status yet. But there are some really big people on social media that people flock to. And you, like you said, they talk about, you know, protecting your peace, and they're like, no is a complete sentence. And I have said that too, but I try to provide context. Or they'll say, you know, I don't have to answer the phone if I don't want to. Like yes and no, right? Because everything needs to be done within context. Because if you keep blocking people and not answering the phone, then you're going to be sitting in my chair trying to figure out why don't nobody want to fool with you. Right. So it needs to be a balance of knowing how to set healthy boundaries, verbalizing what you need from that relationship, but also being able to be protective of your space. So it doesn't always have to be the detriment of a relationship because you're protecting your peace because you following like this really big page on Instagram or TikTok, and these people are not licensed professionals, and so yeah, so social media, it's got to take it with a grain of salt with some things.
Right. And I think something to take away from that is that, like you said, there is, when you say something, there has to be a context behind it. It's not just say no and it's a complete sentence and that's it. Or I'm going to block you and that's the end of the story, right? So you brought up the word boundaries, and I have my own personal definition that I kind of use. So when you talk about boundaries to your clients or to people in general, how do you explain that?
Yeah. So typically, when I'm talking about boundaries, I remind people that we cannot enforce our boundaries onto other people. Our boundaries are for us. This is saying that this is my line and you can't cross over that. It is not saying these are my beliefs and I'm going to put them on you. Right. And then when I talk about boundaries, I also talk about positive communication. So typically when before I even talk about boundaries, I'm talking about positive communication skills first.
Yeah.
Because most people will come and say, "Hey, I saw this thing on TikTok," or they'll start it off with some type of meme or something they saw on social media, which I love it because it's a great conversation starter. But I'll take it a step back and I'll ask them, I'll start probing with different questions like how did we get here? Like, you want to block this person, but let's back up. How did we get here? What did you say? Oh, you blocking people while they're responding? That's rude. Like, that's mean. Not. And so I kind of take it from the beginning with them, talking about positive communication, seeing where the conversation kind of went left. And then also I do a lot of role play. Like, okay, sis, instead of saying that, you might have we could have said this instead.
Right.
So I very rarely start with boundaries. I typically start with positive communication skills because that's mostly what boundary setting is.
Right.
If we can master positive communication, then naturally we will teach people how to treat us, i.e. those boundaries. And it doesn't have to be some, rude, I'm cutting everybody out of my life type of thing.
Right. And I also, to add to that, something I think is critical is that you have to understand the root. You have to understand the root.
Yeah.
Why you respond a certain way, why you feel compelled to block somebody, why it made you angry that they said something this way or that way, which may be your trigger.
Yeah.
It's really understanding the root, which I believe that going to a professional allows you to do that, because there's certain ways that we are trained and skilled to uncover those behaviors and those things that get to the root, that deals with why can't you effectively communicate? Why do you not, communicate how you feel, or why do you shut down when conflict arises? And again, if you're not aware, which ultimately that's how I look at healing, and it becomes self-awareness. But understanding the root.
Absolutely. That's the most important thing. Like I was saying earlier, everyone wants to talk about boundaries because it's trendy, and that's a word that you used, and it's a thing. Like, mental health right now and certain words are trendy. Like, people saying toxic is trendy. People calling other people a narcissist. Trendy. Self-care, trendy. It's just like, okay, we need to put this into context, because y'all keep spending all y'all paycheck on self-care and then wonder why you ain't got no money. So still making sure that we can do both, right? Self-care does not always mean that you have to spend buttloads of money, but that comes in terms of having those communication skills and making sure that you start to learn in therapy, kind of what those triggers are for you and what's the root cause of these things, so that we can kind of address those instead of doing what's trendy.
Right. Absolutely agree. And just for you guys, if you're tuning in right now, if you have questions and you're not comfortable with dropping them in the chat, feel free to shoot me a message in my inbox, or if you have Dee's inbox, shoot her a message, and we'll be make sure to cover it in confidence on the live. Um, and here's a question, and I'll go ahead and show this. This is from someone who is tapping in on YouTube, and she wants us to speak about the growing numbers of suicide amongst children and young adults. This is huge, and it's been heavy to say the least, especially from a professional perspective. So I'll let you kind of start with that dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny that that's a question, because earlier I was reading an article about the increase in suicide attempts, specifically amongst the Black community since the pandemic has started. I think there's been upwards of I think the article said a 40% increase,
Wow.
just in Black folks verbalizing that they have either had a failed suicide attempt, or that they are currently thinking about it. And so to think that we've been in the pandemic, what, a little 2 years or so,
Mm-hmm.
and in that time, there's been a 40% increase. And that data was collected from people ranging from the age of 12 to 50. So
Mm,
it's, we're not just seeing it in young children, which, I mean, that is a large group as well, but also in some of our older adults. I think it's particularly telling because we were in isolation for a very long time.
right.
I remember I was working in the hospital setting when this happened. So I mean, I never got sent home. I worked in a hospital. So I worked through the entire pandemic. But I do remember like the weekends and everything else, just coming home and there's nothing to do. The plans that we had on Monday, by Friday of that first week of the pandemic, like everything had
Was
shut down. And
right.
we were told, oh, 14 days, stay in the house 14 days, make sure you have enough food for 14 days, and it's going to be over in a little bit. And here we are 2 years later, and it's still not over. But I certainly think the pandemic plays a large part in the increase in suicidality as well as suicide attempts. And another thing is the social media. We kind of talked about the good, and unfortunately, this is the bad part of social media. Being on TikTok, seeing people only posting their successes, or seeing people post the good things that happen to them. It sometimes can allow people to internalize those things as failures, like they're not doing what they're supposed to do, or things are not happening for them, and so those thoughts and those self-doubts do increase for some.
Absolutely agree. And I think the other part of it is that a lot of people are not taught how to love and embrace themselves. They
Hmm.
have to perform at all times. I have
Hmm.
to operate at my best. I have to make sure I'm showing up, especially when you're talking about children and young adults. I have to look a certain way because the people on social media look like this, or especially with Black kids who may not be in a room or setting with other Black kids, they're seeing other kids with straight hair and
Yeah.
thin, and they may have
Yeah.
different builds. And so a lot of kids are not being taught how to embrace their individuality and what being themselves is, other than performing. And with young adults, you see a lot of pressure to be perfect. We can look at a situation with Chesley Chris, who was beautiful and
Absolutely.
successful, and I watched the Red Table Talk with her mom, and she was in pain for a long time.
Yeah.
A long time.
Absolutely.
But you would think, based off of the surface, that, oh my gosh, why would she? But see, that all of that's just the surface.
Hmm.
People have to really uncover and really process that when the doors are closed and the makeup is off, and the who are you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Who
Right.
are you? And I often pose that question a lot, and it's something that I hold personal to myself and to a lot of people around me. How do you define yourself outside of the roles that you serve?
Hmm.
If you're a mom if the first thing that you want to say is, hey, I'm such and such and I'm a mom, wait, pause, because now you're just the title. You're not this. And so that
Absolutely.
becomes the trend between young adults, children, they become a title. And so when it comes down to just, I'm Sierra, like
Mhm.
that's it, you know, see,
Mhm.
what are my qualities and who am I to the core and what do I like beyond all of that stuff? People get lost in that. And so I think the pandemic exposed a lot of how people had no identity.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
No, I 100% agree with that. And the quietness and stillness
Mhm.
of the pandemic, of not being able to busy ourselves, not being able to go anywhere. You sit with who you are, and sometimes that's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
One of the biggest therapeutic tools that I've learned from my supervisor, my ex supervisor, who is watching, I saw her name. One the biggest thing is silence, therapeutic silence. And so sometimes when we are sitting with ourselves and there's no outside noise, there's no, oh, I have to take the kid to practice, oh, I
Mhm.
need to go meet my friend for brunch, there's none of that due to, at the beginning of the pandemic. And so all of the titles, like you talked about, all of the responsibilities and things that we busied ourselves with, it was stripped away. And
Yeah.
then we had the opportunity to sit with who we are.
Mhm.
And that raised a lot of questions, like, do I even like who I am? Do I even know who I am?
Mhm. And I think a lot of people don't give themselves an opportunity to question, am I authentic in this moment?
Hmm.
And when you do that, you really have to be honest with yourself. And I think that, again, a lot of people are operating from such a performative state that when you take your mask off, is that who you show other people? Do you feel like that person is going to be accepted? Are you accepted of that person? And
Hmm.
like you said, sitting in silence is one of my favorite things. It don't happen often because of my kids,
Yeah.
but sometimes I literally just sit in my office and pay attention to what noises can I hear right now.
Hmm.
But a lot of times people are in this mode. I gotta go. I gotta do. I gotta think. What am I gonna do now? What am I gonna do 5 years from now? How am I gonna be rich? Or how am I gonna plan for? And it's just like slow down,
Hmm.
because a lot of people don't know how to be present,
Hmm.
and the pandemic taught us that. When you
Absolutely.
don't have anything else and you got to focus on nothing but the here and now, what are you going to do?
Absolutely. And because of that very thing, that same article was talking about the increase of clients signing up for therapy. Like,
Mm,
there are some clinicians that I know personally, and they're like, I can't, like, I literally cannot take
right.
any more clients on, because people are literally like, yo, they're knocking down therapists' doors,
Mm,
because the stillness, the quietness has revealed some things. And even it's tested relationships. People are, we've seen, even me with, working at a university, we're doing a lot of couples counseling with university students,
mhm.
because they're not as many on campus activities. So they're spending a lot of times in their dorms, and you know, it's conflict, honey. It be
Right.
drama. so, so everyone is needing, needing that third party to kind of reflect and kind of kind of process these situations with.
Yeah. Yeah, all of that. So thank you again for your question. That was very relevant to the conversation and what's happening into the world. Again, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chats and we'll be able to see those, or shoot us a direct message so that we can answer your questions. Kind of moving through what we have here, and then we'll go over some questions that we had from the audience that was sent to us. But you use TikTok, like I said at the beginning. I just kind of fell in love. I was like, oh, this is this is good. To talk about mental health,
Yeah.
how do you feel like that approach that you have? Because you're very raw and relatable, and it's really not that kind of like uptight. So if I was seeing you for the first time, I would definitely be like, I need a therapist like her. Um, so how do you feel like that helps people who are looking to start their mental health journey?
Absolutely. So the whole TikTok thing started just because I wanted to show people that therapy doesn't have to be scary.
Mhm.
So I pride myself on authenticity. People who know me, oh honey, especially my former supervisor, I know I'm talking about her because she really helped mold me as a clinician.
Right.
because sometimes I would say stuff that she would be like, "D, you got to put a little sugar on it. You got to put a little sugar on it." So I constantly remind myself it's okay to be authentic to who I am.
Right.
But also knowing when to reel it in a little bit. But for me, using TikTok was important because of my personal experience with therapy. My first therapist was a white man, and I was in Indiana, northern Indiana. It wasn't no black people there, honey. It was no black people. So when I was in therapy, although he was a great clinician, I felt like I had to present a certain way because I mean this it's therapy, right? So I felt like it was supposed to be a certain thing. I had expectations. And then I got a black therapist, a black female therapist. She's awesome. I'm still with her today, years later. And I realized through her, through my supervisor, through working with through working with adolescents, because they will help you, they will mold you into a clinician. You work with kids, they will make you work.
They the realest of the realest, okay? And will try you.
Those kids in inpatient setting, they're gonna try you. They gonna try you. So it was a mixture of that personal experience, professional experience, and trying to show up a certain way. I went to a PWI for both undergrad and grad school, but specifically for grad school, we did these like mock clinical sessions, and in the moment when my professor wasn't looking at me, I always did good. Right. But when my professor's eyes were on me and I felt like I had to present a certain way, I didn't feel true to myself. And I always, I always kind of told myself, like, when I graduate, I'm going to do therapy the way I want to. And so just kind of dealing with that, like how the world says you should present as a therapist versus who I am. And I always found better outcomes by being honest instead of using big words like cognitive behavioral therapy. Hey, let's talk about some things we want to change. Okay, we said this. What's another way we can reframe that? Let's reword that a little bit. Instead of saying solution focused therapy. All right, what's the problem? Here's the solution. All right, give me 2 solutions to this problem. Right. And I found that people respond better that way instead of using all these fancy words. So yeah, that's my thing. That's my approach to TikTok, showing people that therapy essentially is a guided conversation. It's just a conversation. And so just allowing yourself to go, do the first step and just make the appointment and have a conversation with that professional.
Yeah. And one of the things that I learned going through school is I remember going into my internship, and the day one, my professor was like, I ain't with the BS. I'm going to give it to you like it's straight, whatever. And every time we would have to do role play, I would feel like I had to say certain things and do certain things. And one day there was another girl in our class I will never forget. And it was myself and her, and we were the only Black girls in our class. And she said something about changing her name on the resume. And I was like, no, ma'am. And I mean, when I tell you, I went in the most like professional homegirl way. Right. And my professor said, that's it. He said, that's it. He said, that's it. And I was just like, what? I mean, I just gave her what she needed because we're not going to downplay ourselves. And he said, no, he was like, that's the approach that you have to take, because even working with adolescents, they gonna call bullshit when they see it.
Absolutely.
They're going to do it. And so there was no way, and I was in an alternative school. There was no way I was about to walk into school
and
try to be this perfect Patty, because they would call you out on that. And so what I learned, even from a professional standpoint, is that if you're not authentic, you're not going to get your client to be authentic either.
Nope. They can see it.
They can see it. Absolutely. And they're going to call you out on it. And then you're going to have to be looking like, do I need to be on somebody's couch trying to deal with my own stuff, And so I think it gives you that, like you said, it creates that dynamic for that authenticity, and for you to be able to reach people and meet people where they are and get them to where they're trying to go. Now, maybe they will learn things like what cognitive behavioral therapy is. However, me saying that means absolutely nothing to somebody who is looking at me. One of the things as a professional that I ain't gonna say I hate it because that's such a strong word, but that kind of like blows my mind is when I go to websites and I see these, and I'm just like, don't nobody know what that is?
I hate that because that information isn't for the client. That's really for us. Yeah, it's an ego boost.
Because they gonna go Google what it is and they gonna be like, that's too much, right? Versus, like you said, if I can put this in terms in which you understand, this helps me, one, connect with you, and also understand that I don't have to come in here knowledgeable about what we're gonna do and how we're gonna do it. I just need to show up.
That's it. That's
I
it.
need to show up. Yeah.
Agree. I love that. And you talked a little bit about perfectionism as well, and like high achieving adults. And for a clinician, especially me, my approach in being authentic, we have enough with Instagram. People only post the best pictures, brunch with the girls, traveling, Facebook, I bought a house, I'm having a baby, I'm getting married, even LinkedIn, I got a new job, I got a promotion. It's all the good things.
Good stuff.
And if we are telling our clients that I just need you to show up, we're going to have to model that behavior.
Oh my gosh.
How can we model behavior if we're over here, like got our cardigan all pulled up and we're like, no, tell me more about that. Like, it's just, that does not work for everyone all the time. Instead of, like, for me, I have mostly Black women on my caseload. So I always start my session off with, what's tea? What happened? Give me the tea. I am not saying, all right, let's catch up from what happened last time.
Yeah.
That don't work for my clientele. What's tea? Girl, what happened? You call that boy back.
Right. Or showing up in a 3-piece suit. You gonna catch me in these jeans. I might have on a trendy shirt, or I might have on a t-shirt, and I'm definitely gonna have on my sneakers.
Period.
Okay, like that's where we going. But again, I think leaning into that authentic point of like your authentic personality and who you are definitely creates a different vibe. Even when it comes down to social media, I legit answer. Somebody posed a question about I can't even remember, but it was something about what are you doing to get your next client or whatever. And I said, making sure that I'm showing up in the way that I want them to show up. So I ain't on social media every day acting like, oh, I got it all together. And this is because some days I be like, I don't want to do nothing. I have days where I be like, nope, I don't want to show up today. I don't want to be a mom. I don't want to do this.
Absolutely.
And that's okay because I'm giving myself permission to do that. And I'm publicly showing, hey, I'm giving myself permission to do that.
Absolutely.
When my clients tap in with me or people who are like really on this like genuine mental health journey, not just the trend, it's like, okay, I don't have to show this perfect version of myself all the time to be accepted or to be liked. And that is so important.
Absolutely. We are in a perfect society, a bunch of perfect people.
And ain't got not one thing perfect.
Ain't got it together. Ain't got it together. Everybody faking it.
Right. So I think we covered question 5, which was what have you found as why Black people don't go to therapy. So I'll skip to question number 6 and say, what are your top 3 reasons why everybody should go?
Yeah, my top 3. So my first one is going to be to help. I would say the top 3 3 reasons you should go is to help heal historical and racial trauma. We see this all the time. We see it with police brutality. We saw it with that January 6th storm the Capitol mess, right? Like if that were us, we already know that like the narrative would have been completely different. The story would have been different. There would have been more deaths. Like it would have been ridiculous. We see our Black brothers and sisters dying, being murdered at the hands of police. We see trauma within our own communities as well. So I think that, the first thing that we need to do, we need to go and talk about some of that historical and racial trauma, stuff that we are seeing, even stuff that we didn't see firsthand, but it has been passed down to us. That's important to kind of discuss that history. Next, it's important to help heal that family and childhood trauma that we have as well. There are a lot of things that our family might have taught us, and not to say, parents and grandparents and all that, they did the best they could with what they had. However, we know there's some things that could have been done a little bit better.
Right.
So when we know better, we do better. So definitely going to therapy to talk about that family and childhood trauma. And then lastly, like going to therapy to learn positive coping skills. We as black people, we don't have the best coping skills. When we get upset, we argue, we yell, we dismiss people, we shut down, we run away. We do so many things. We cope, but it ain't always the healthiest. So I think, number 3 for me would be going to therapy, of course, for you to learn coping skills so that, the rest of your days will be a lot better than what it was before. Especially when you were operating in that trauma or traumatic state, that fight, flight, or freeze response. So yeah, going to therapy to learn those coping skills.
Yeah. And I think that once you, as an individual, decide to make that decision to go and start to see yourself do things differently, you influence other people to do that as well. And so
Yeah.
I noticed that when I got on my journey, more people in my circle start asking questions or, being like, well, do you have recommendations on who I could see or whatever? And so you start to, like, when you start positively, then you start healing that family, and then that it kind of like a ripple effect to what your top 3 says. And I think that's so important. But we have a question here that says, any guidance for men seeking therapy? This is a good one, and I'll let you start here, just kind of giving your feedback on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the main advice that I have for men seeking therapy: find someone that you trust. If that happens to be another man, great. Which I do find, with most of my male clients, they do prefer to see, initially at least, they prefer to see another man, and I do see, the outcomes be better, right? Because just like me, I'm bringing my authentic self. Someone who is male identified as a clinician, they're going to bring their authenticity and they're going to bring their male experiences to therapy as well, a perspective that I cannot bring because I'm not male identified. So I say, look for a clinician who looks like you, and then kind of research, like, whatever you are wanting to kind of fix and navigate through therapy. Just kind of do a quick Google search to see who specializes in that in your area. You don't want to go to somebody who just specializes in anxiety and your focus is depression, because I mean, they could be helpful, but is that the help that you need? Not necessarily. But I certainly think that men should go to therapy, because that's a conversation that we don't always talk about, because men, especially black men, they have a lot of weight to carry in the world, and we expect men to just carry the weight of the world because, like, you a man. But because of that weight that they're carrying, whether they're heads of households or, they're making financial decisions, or they're making a lot of decisions and have a lot of responsibility, but they don't typically have an outlet because they don't want to worry their partners. They don't want to talk about it with their friends. So where does that information go? So
Right.
yeah, I definitely think men in therapy, I think it's a great idea. Just finding someone that looks like you.
Yeah. And my advice would be, give yourself permission to go.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Give yourself permission to go, because I think because of this, oh, I'm a man and crying is weak. Again, going back to some of the things that we're taught and especially in black families,
Yep.
you have to literally give yourself permission to be like, you know what? There are some things within me that I know that may not be right, whether that's your relationship with other men, other women, your family, your wife, all of that you're like, this ain't adding up for me. So you have to give yourself permission to just be in that space. Therapy don't have to be something that you broadcast. And as a professional, we can't be like, oh yeah, that's my client right there. So
Right.
along with finding somebody that you feel comfortable with, that you build rapport with, because on day one you ain't gonna know. You're not going to know. But if you give yourself permission to be like, you know what, I know I need this and I want to try, that changes your whole perspective on your approach, which then gives you the vulnerability and kind of giving you that reason to sustain through seeing it through. So that's my
Absolutely. I love that.
my
I
my
love
little
that.
my little 2 cents as it relates to that. So I want to jump to, so I'm gonna skip our next question. I want to jump to a couple of the questions that I know that both of us received. So
Okay.
one of the questions that we received is, why is it so hard for a therapist that I trust? Why is it so hard to find a therapist that I trust? And is there a checklist I should use?
So I guess my take on that is, a therapist isn't one size fits all.
Mhm.
There have been some clients that I have had, and my approach is not that it doesn't suit their expectations. So we've had one or two sessions, and I ended up referring them to another clinician. So it's okay, to have to shop around with therapists. No one says that you have to find one in the first two sessions.
Mhm.
But just kind of allowing yourself to know that it's okay to find people who fit with your vibe, who fits with your personality. If they say something that makes you uncomfortable, then it's okay to change. Just like it's okay to change a doctor's office. If the doctor say something a little crazy to you, you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna find me another provider. It's okay to take that same approach. And part of that, when you are looking for someone that you can trust and feel safe with, a part of that is showing a lot of your strength because you're advocating for your needs. You're
Mhm.
saying this person is not able to fulfill what I'm needing. So I'm advocating for myself, and I'm going to find someone else. So on one hand, kind of give yourself some props about that. You know what you're looking for, and you just know that you haven't found it yet. There's a lot of different directories. If you're a Black woman, Black girls in social, not Black girls in social work, Black girls in therapy.com is a great resource. You can type in your location, and there's a list of certified clinicians in your area that will do telehealth as well as in-person sessions. If not, you can look on Psychology Today, and you can change the filters as well. Those are two websites that I always
Mhm.
recommend to try to find the right fit for you.
And when you're looking at websites and researching, because it's a process, like, don't think that getting a therapist is just something you're like, oh, let me click on this name and I'm gonna go the first day. Don't do that. Don't do that. Give yourself an opportunity to actually, okay, go to their website. What vibes do you get from their
Mhm.
website? Do you feel comfortable with whatever information is being presented there? Do you see pictures? Can you connect? Like, are you looking at their social media to see what kind of approach, even on social media, are they connecting with you? I know, just like I said with D, like, when you go to her TikTok, which we'll get that, you're really gonna get like some real chill vibes. If you go to
Mhm.
my social media, you are not about to get, okay, let's sit down and talk. I'm gonna give it to you straight, but I'm
Mhm.
also gonna make the content relatable, and I'm gonna talk to you like you're a person, right?
Mhm.
So what are you getting, the vibes that you get from the websites and social media? And also, like Dee said, it's okay to try a therapist and say, you know what, this is not working for me. Or even if your therapist says something or does something that you don't like, check them. At the
Mhm.
end of the day, we human.
Mhm.
We're going to make mistakes. Sometimes we might say something the wrong way, but when you are building that relationship, because that's what it is, when you build that relationship, you get to a point where you can be like, you know what, you said that. Again, understanding your communication. Like, it starts in therapy, because as you become more comfortable to call your therapist out, who is a professional, as you get more comfortable in saying these are the limitations and stuff like that of what I will accept from a provider or whatever, and you start to move on, you'll start to show up like that in your life as well. And so just understanding, like, on one hand, you really like doing some really dope stuff, because you're becoming more self-aware as you navigate through finding the right person for you. My first therapist, similar to your experience, was a white woman. And while she was dope and helped me get to a good place in my journey, she was nothing like my Black therapist that I got now, right?
Mhm.
And I think that just being able to just not feel like I have to censor myself in some of the things that I say, or if I'm like, like that girl,
Yeah.
that vibe is something that I needed. And so being aware of what you need, I think, is a way to kind of navigate how do you find the right therapist.
Mhm.
The next question we got was, how do you keep from isolating from your loved ones when you are struggling with your mental health?
I think the biggest thing is to be honest about how you're feeling. And in that honesty, letting them know, like, hey, typically I isolate when I'm feeling this way. And when you tell people that, most times they're going to want to intrude on your space. But that is a good opportunity to try to enforce some boundaries, right? Like, I don't need you to be intrusive, but I'm okay with you checking in on me every couple of hours. And then also, while you're isolating, a part of isolation says I want to be by myself. That's what the forefront of that says. But if you dig a little bit deeper, and this is not a therapy session, but if you dig a little bit deeper, are we really wanting isolation? Or are we really wanting someone to validate how we feel?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, yeah, we say we isolate because we want to be by ourselves. But most of that comes from seeking validation. So, if
Mm-hmm.
you're being honest about how you're feeling during isolation and you have people that are wanting to be supportive to you, allow them to be. Of course, if they are trying to be on the phone for an hour and a half, 2 hours, you can say, all right, that's enough for today. Thank you so much for checking in on me. But being okay with receiving that love and that support that they're trying to give you.
Right. I agree with that. And to add, just being mindful of asking yourself, what do I need in this moment? Because one of the things that a lot of people love to say that just is, I'm holding space. But a lot of people don't even know what that means.
Mhm.
Holding space doesn't mean that you have the answers. Holding space does not mean that you are giving somebody something or you're trying. It's not that. It's, if I need you to hold space for me, I need you to make yourself available for whatever it is I need in that moment.
Yep.
If that's, I need to cry and I don't need you to say nothing, let me cry. I don't need you. Don't ask me what's wrong. Don't tell me it's gonna be okay. I don't need that. I just need you to be present for what I need in the moment. So I think that in that you also have to be aware of what it is that you need in the moments of isolation, like you said, and be able to articulate that to whomever is trying to understand why you're isolating or wants to be in your space or whatever. Going back
Absolutely.
again to that positive coping skills and positive communication.
Mhm.
Again, all of this stuff works together.
Absolutely.
Um,
And
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I did get a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Um, so this question, how do you support family members who have a history of severe mental illness when they don't want to continue therapy or take their medication, but they continue down the path of suicidal attempts and unexplained behavior?
Mm. My first take on it is that you can't force anybody to do anything. And I know for us, our approach as far as like safety measures and what ethics and all of that is
Mhm.
different from the average person, but it's almost like you really have to evaluate what are the risks. Is this person a legit harm to themselves? Or are they just saying it? Do you feel that there is um, harm going to be done to them or themselves or other people, and really taking that in account? Because a lot of times I think that we see a lot of people try to do more for people that they aren't willing to do for themselves, which then leads them to go into their own issues themselves. Because then if something happens, it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't do enough or I didn't do this or whatever. And it's like, but you can't force anybody to do anything, right? So
Mhm.
I think that it's just educating yourself too on one of the trainings that I took prior to going to school is a mental health first aid class.
Mhm.
Being able to just educate myself on, all right, if I'm in a situation, what do I do?
Mhm.
What are some measures that I can take, whether somebody is willing or not willing? And if you're understanding or you know the diagnosis or whatever that a person has, educating yourself on things that you can do from just being aware of, okay, if somebody is having an episode of this, then I can do this, or these are the things that I should think about. I think going back to what you said earlier is that education piece. But just knowing that it ain't always going to be your responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's something to kind of like, sit on too.
Absolutely. My first thought, of course, without knowing all of the details or really any of the details, it depends on the background, right? If this person has a trauma history in terms of like sexual assault, making them and forcing them to attend treatment and therapy, that's already going to be a trigger for them, because they were made to do something that they didn't want to do already. So keeping in mind what their background is, and just asking them, why don't you want to go to therapy? Why don't you want to take your medications? I worked in inpatient for 3 years. Sometimes, people didn't want to take their medications because of the side effects. For some of our adult patients, some of the psychiatric medications cause erectile dysfunction. If I'm a man and I'm, in my 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever, and I have a partner, okay, yeah, like I'm taking medicines, but I also want to have sex. Right. But if I'm taking these psychiatric medications, I can't get my thing up. So that could be a barrier. I'm working on a college campus now. Some of the side effects to like ADHD medication is lack of appetite for some people. Some is increased appetite. Some is weight gain. And, traditionally for women don't want to gain no weight.
Right.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is ask the family member, what's the barrier? Why are you not wanting to take your medications? Why are you not wanting to attend therapy? Sometimes it's a fairly simple fix because they just want to feel heard. Of course, like Sierra was saying, if you feel like they're an immediate threat to themselves or others, certainly call 911, or try to get them in at a hospital to see if they can get a psychiatric evaluation. Maybe an inpatient stay is necessary to make sure they're safe. But in short, we have to respect people's right to self-determination, which basically means if they're an adult, we have to respect their decisions, regardless of if it doesn't feel good to us, because as family members, as friends, we care about this person. We don't want them to do anything to themselves. But kind of the number one rule of therapy, you can't work harder than the client. Mm-hmm. If I want my client to live, but my client don't want to live, we have there's a difference of the wills there, right? So we have to make sure that we're respecting what they want to do. And I'm in no way saying it's okay to allow people to hurt themselves. But I am saying that it's important for us to have the conversation about what those barriers are and see if we can kind of navigate and mitigate those barriers.
Yeah. And just to add on to that even further, think of this question and ask this: how can I support you in this moment? Mm-hmm. That's it. And when what they say, honor that. Don't try to wail them or you need to know. If you ask a person, how do I support you in this moment? Or what do you need from me? And they tell you, as long as it's within limits of where they don't create harm to themselves or harm to other people, you are really, again, holding space for that person because they're communicating exactly what they need from you in the moment. So I think that's something very important to take into consideration as well.
Absolutely.
So if you don't have another question, the last question that I have is, why are we told to pray the feelings and thoughts away? If this is the response that I receive when I mention anything about depression or anxiety.
Yeah. Kind of like we were talking about earlier, the Black church, right? The Black church can be a barrier to receiving mental health treatment, right? So spirituality is important in mental health treatment. I talk about it a lot. For a lot of my clients, they do believe in a higher power, someone greater than them. And we do see better outcomes when people do have a basis of some sort of spirituality, because that gives intrinsic value. That it helps give hope and all the good stuff. So spirituality is certainly a positive coping skill. The issue with the Black church is at times it is used as a weapon, right? They're like, oh, pray. And so you're like, well, I'm praying, but I'm still depressed. Well, you're not praying hard enough. Are you reading your Bible? Are you fasting? Are you out there sinning? So it puts the blame on the person versus us just saying, okay, I have a chemical imbalance. Like I can pray all day, but I still need some medicine for depression. I still get anxious when I'm around people, so I need some medication for that. I need to go talk to a therapist. So the Black church has an interesting way sometimes of making the fault our own. When some things we know are just biology. So in terms of praying, I'm not saying stop, because if that's your spirituality, if you find relief in praying, certainly do that. And if you find that is not enough, then certainly seek out help. Try to find a therapist. Like I said, Therapy for Black Girls or Psychology Today are two good websites, or you can always DM me. I can help you find someone in your area. And also, when you find these certain practices for therapy or medication, just look at some Google reviews on them as well. Most therapists offer a 10 or 15-minute free consultation. So you'll find a therapist, like Sierra said, don't just go just thinking that it's going to be a good fit, but contact them at their they usually have a phone. Well, they'll have a phone number, or you can email them. But it's best to kind of get a feel for these therapists over the phone. There's, like I said, there's typically a free consultation period, and you can let them know that you're nervous. Let them know that these are the problems that you're having during that consultation period, and see what their response is. And if they're responding in a way that you feel would be helpful for you, that's when I would encourage you to book an appointment. But I guess in short, just making sure that you use religion, of course, as a coping skill and all of the great things that religion brings us, right? But also knowing that there's some natural things that religion can't do. Like you can pray, but I mean, if the prayer at the time is not working and you're still having these symptoms and side effects of depression, then it might be time to look at something that we can do in the natural and not just spiritual.
Yeah. And remember that whoever and whatever you believed in created people like us for a reason.
For a reason.
For a reason. And next week, we're going to have a whole Beyond the White Couch on the Black church, because there's been a lot of things that I've experienced in my own perspective, and other people and that experience a lot of what was asked in that question. And like you said, there's a lot of harm that can come from the Black church that we aren't talking about. And so next week, I have another mental health professional who will be on, who will dive into that as well, about the Black church. But ultimately, know that you can pray, go to church, and have a therapist.
You can do it all.
You can do it all.
You can do both of them.
All of them. But I just want to say thank you, Dee, so much for joining Beyond the White Couch today. This has been such a valuable conversation. Yes. For those of you who are still watching, please drop in the comments what you took away, what was valuable to you, and how you feel right now, even attending this, and just getting some feedback from you allows us to, even as professionals, to see the needs in our community. How can we do more things like this that provides education to make moving to the next phase a comfortable space for you? So I would, invite you to let people know how they can connect with you. One of the questions was, can you share your TikTok? So make sure that you do that. And whatever information that you would like to share on how people can get connected with you.
Absolutely. So my TikTok is Therapy with D, Therapy, WITHDDEE. If you are sensitive and you don't like to hear people cursing, don't follow me on TikTok. And if my mom is watching, I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry. I do curse because I work with young adults. And I mean, that's just a part of my therapeutic style.
Okay? Relatable content.
just trying to be relatable, right? So if you don't like to hear a lot of cursing, probably don't follow me. But I do have some other content that is without cursing as well. But I do make humorous but relatable and factual therapy content. So Therapy with D on TikTok. And then as far as Facebook, it's my name, Deeariah King, and it's right here on the screen, Deeariah King. And I am working on a professional or a business page for my IG, because right now my IG is personal. So gotta have something for myself.
Yes, and I got one other question, and I just
Okay.
want to insert this really quickly. It says, how do you deal with family and friends who tell you not to take your prescription medication for anxiety and depression? I'll kind of reverse back to what we were saying when Dee had her question. Especially if this is from a personal perspective, you have to do and operate in a way that is healthy and functional for you. So if the meds help you function at your best, by all means.
Yeah.
By all
Agreed.
means. Yeah.
Agreed. You know, I did, I think I mentioned it earlier. I did inpatient work for 3 years. And a large part of my job was educating the family. Like the client, that was the easy part. It's the family. Like, and so most times with family, what I recognize, the reason that they're telling you not to take it is probably because they don't understand, right?
Mhm.
There's a lack of education, and also a lack of that we don't trust. There is, especially with older generations, there is a mistrust of medicine. There's a mistrust of doctors, mental health professionals, because typically these are white people. We've seen it with like the Tuskegee air experiment. We've seen it with experimenting on people of color with birth control, and all these hysterectomies and everything else that they practice. They practice on people of color. So the hesitancy around trusting professionals, those feelings are valid, right? But since we do have education, and since we do have the access to education, and we have access to providers who look like us, I would encourage you to reach out to a provider. Hopefully your provider is a person of color, if you're a person of color, and have your family speak to them. If there are any questions that they may have, talk to them about what's realistic, and ask, and get your family to talk about some of their concerns. I'm willing to bet most of the concerns are just the fact that they're afraid of what the side effects, or if they're experimenting on you, because there is a mistrust of the medical community, rightfully so. But having that opportunity to have your family be educated. But as Sierra said, if you see a difference in how you're feeling, continue to take that medication, and then we'll work on getting family on board.
Right. And I want you guys to definitely, this is not a substitute for therapy by any means or any kind of professional help. This is definitely a way for us to be able to engage with people from a very high level and somewhat, detailed level, for you to get an introduction of like just having a conversation of mental health and that be normalized. I think that is so critical for our community. And Beyond the White Couch was created specifically for that. So definitely make sure that you connect with Dee. Follow her on TikTok. I'm telling you, you will not be disappointed. And make sure that you connect with me as well with Recycle Energy, and tune in to what's happening with Beyond the White Couch next week, about talking about the Black church, and then the next week after that we're talking about Black relationships and what that look like. And then the last one will be about Black woman disrobe. And I'm super excited about all the professionals who are on the lineup, and what conversations and what actions are taken from these types of conversations. So again, thank you so much, you guys, for tuning in. Dee, thank you again.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited. And you guys, just remember that your journey is your journey. Your healing journey and what it looks like for you is not going to be what the next person. I always say healing is personal, and you should move just like that. So until next week, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Again, thank you, Dee, for tuning in. Yes. And so excited for next week as well.
Absolutely. I will be a viewer next week. I'm excited about that conversation.
Absolutely.